This is the Ozark Trail Slalom, FS.2 Slalom, and it does not disappoint. Ozark Trail was the champion of affordable bikes in 2024, the best features at the lowest price. Can they do the same thing with a full suspension mountain bike? Yes. The answer is yes. As a matter of fact, I thought we were still years away from some of the components you're about to see spec'd on a Walmart affordable bike, so hang on, you're in for a treat today. Let's get started like I like to do, up at the bars, the width of which 730 millimeters grip end to grip end, not too wide and definitely not too narrow, right in the middle of my preferred bar width zone. Diameter 31.8, and look at this, double indexing marks line up the arrows and everything is perfectly in position. That means this bike's not only capable, but it's going to be easy to put together. I have a video coming on that. Let's look at these grips because they too are new double end lock-ons. Slightly more squishy than what was on the Ozark Trail Ridge. That means they're going to be easier on rough terrain, meaning easier on hands and easier to hold on to. Beside the right grip, a trigger shifter, my favorite kind, the easy fire type called Rapid Fire Plus now. It has the familiar Shimano feeling because it is a Shimano Cues. Cues is a new set of drivetrain components just showing up on bikes at local bike shops. It's a big deal and we're going to come back to this. Brakes, mechanical. The levers are alloy, not plastic, and as far as mechanical levers go, these are firm with no flex, especially when squeezing hard, and that tends to happen those white knuckle moments on the trail. These, at least for mechanical brake levers, they do the job. And again, they're alloy, not plastic. That's the base bar components, highlights the grips, and of course the Cues. The Cues is the really big thing here. Let's move to the stem next, and I like what I'm seeing here. I measured this one at 50 millimeters, putting it in the average mountain biker's happy zone. The stem grips onto the fork steer, and that runs through the head tube, the tapered head tube. Common to have a taper even on big box mountain bikes these days, but not always a guarantee. This fork adapted to fit with its straight steer, an SR Suntour XCM30 with 120 millimeters of travel. An XCM with 100 millimeters of travel meets the KevCentral basic standards for a trail. This has 20 more millimeters. Sandwiched between the fork tubes, the front wheel wrapped with cross-country knobby-style Kenda branded tires. Well known on this channel, I call them Kenda Kendas. The Slalom is a 29er. That means these wheels are 29 inches, and the tires themselves also 29 inches, 29 by 2.35. They're wrapped around double wall alloy rims, and these rims, they're wide and external diameter of 30 millimeter, internal 25 millimeter. These tires are tubed, the valve type Presta. And if you haven't noticed, the front end sits very slack. We'll get to that shortly. First, let's move to the drivetrain. Pedals, plastic, enough to get someone riding. It's well-established practice for bikes to ship with cheap plastic pedals, and these will get you going until you get something else. Crank arms, the only non-Cues thing here. These are made by Pro Wheel. They're 170 millimeter and they're forged, not cast. That's important. The chainring is a 30-tooth narrow wide, and all this is ran through a square taper bottom bracket. One by up front. Moving to the back, we get to the other half of the Shimano Cues system. The Ozark Trail Slalom uses the shifter, derailleur, and cassette. And I've seen Cues at the local bike shop, but this is my first hands-on experience with it. And Cues brings the Shimano Shadow Plus technology. Think clutch, but for lower entry options. But they made entry level not so entry, it's really good now. And this works with cassettes from 11 to 46 tooth, and that's exactly what's equipped on this bike, and that's a Shimano cassette. Link Glide, it's not only going to get the max range out of this derailleur, but it's going to work through everything smoothly because it's a paired setup. Don't underestimate how big of a deal this is. New to bike shops group sets, and we're getting them at Walmart racks at about the same time. Very impressive. Oh, and let me add on a small footnote here. You may notice that that doesn't look like a quick release nut. It looks, well, different. And that's because it is a first for any bike I've seen sold at Walmart, and something I thought we would be waiting for quite some time for. The Slalom officially brings boost to big box bikes, to budget bikes. I was purposely not showing you the back of this card because I didn't want to give away the reveal, but there it is. 148 by 12 millimeter boost through axle. This alone is not only the only bike to have this right now, but it makes this probably the most upgradable Walmart bike in history. And we're not done with nice surprises being a dual suspension bike, and if you don't know what that means, there's the 120 millimeter suspension fork up front. This bike also has a suspension at the back via this shock. Now, I've seen plenty of big box suspension bikes, and they usually come with rear shocks that are more show than go, referred to as pogo sticks. Well, this is not one of those. This is an EXAFORM 291R. 185 millimeters eye to eye with 48 millimeters of travel. Now, Walmart told me it's 45, but I went to the website and it said 48, so I'm going to go with that. So put an asterisk there, just in case. Either way, this is better than any other full suspension that I've seen as far as I can recall being offered by Walmart. Adjustable too, with a preload and a rebound adjuster. Looking at the pivot system, I like what I'm seeing here too. I see metal in there. Stay tuned for a full teardown on all this. Be sure to subscribe because I have a full series of videos on this bike, including some unbelievable upgrade videos. But just look at this pivot system. Is it just me, or does this look more beefy than usual? I mean, all this is put together quite well and the welds look good. This looks to be strong. At least it passes the eye test. And it's not just superficial pivots, they're all in the right places for this type setup. And even more impressive to see this flare out for the boost spacing. Just look at those chainstays. And look at that included conformal chainstay guard, keeping the frame well protected on rough terrain. And speaking of frame, let's get to that. Know that I received the bike early, so I don't have official geometry specs. Once they arrive, I'll make another video for them, but I'll also put them in the description on this video. The biggest thing people always ask about is the head tube angle. On this bike, that's slack, especially by Walmart bike standards. Now, this isn't official. I measured it with my iPhone. 64 degrees. And that's just part of the standouts on this frame. Nice tubes, tapered lines, and look at these welds. They're not smooth welds, but they're smooth. I think they look pretty good. Being a modern frame, this has internal cable routing. All the factory cables are routed internally, but there's also built-in extra provisioning for running an external line outside the frame. That means upgrading to hydraulic brakes, especially at the back, easy peasy because you don't have to do it internally. These calipers, completely generic. I couldn't find anything at all printed on them. A bit unique, and the rotor's a bit of an upgrade. The front rotor, 180 millimeters. Well, that's kind of normal now. What's not normal is seeing 180 millimeters at the rear as well. Going back to the front, you may have noticed that the front wheel is a quick release. Usually when I see a bike that has through axle or boost, and then it also has quick release, usually the booster through axle is at the front and the rear is quick release. Not on this bike. And that's a good thing. If you want one of two to be boost, it would be the rear because you can't change the bike's frame. We're getting close to the first ride impressions, but I need to get the manual and the tags off because I have more to say about the frame. This bike is a medium frame, my preferred size. It's going to be offered in a small, medium, and a large. And this medium, I measured it at the seat tube as being 16 inches as the frame size. We'll come back to that because I want to talk about color first. On the labeling of the bike it says cloud gray, but in person it's more of a cloud white. I don't know if they changed the actual color along the way or if the card's graphics just had to be tinted to make it stand out against the white background. But to my eyes, this is white, a good-looking white, but white, not gray, unless it's maybe the lightest possible gray on a color scale. Back to the frame size, my medium measured at the seat tube is 16 inches, and that seat tube is dropper ready with built-in cable port on the back side. But this is where things get a little interesting. Not the seat post itself, that's quite nice, with index markings for easy sizing adjustment between riders, and a diameter that will be pleasing to most at 31.6 millimeters. It even has a good single bolt saddle rail clamp design, and the saddle itself, impressive given the price. I was surprised to see that on the bottom side it says handmade. Swanky. Here's the seat tube guts where the post fits, and this is where it gets interesting. Putting the seat post into the minimum insertion point, the highest the seat can be on this bike is about 40.5 inches, which is about what I expect on a 16-inch frame. However, when I drop it to the lowest point, it doesn't drop much. Sitting at the lowest, it rests at 37.5 inches, which is a little bit tall in my opinion for a 16-inch frame. And it gets even more interesting, the standover height on this medium 16-inch frame is 31 inches. That's how most large frames fit me, so it's a little different. Not bad, just different. One last component, a kickstand. It comes factory equipped with the Slalom, though not factory installed. You have to bolt it on, and look at that. If you take it off, there's no tangs or prongs sticking down. It's there if you want it. The mounting system practically disappears if you don't. And even with that kickstand, the bike's weight, 39.4 pounds. So a kickstand, boost, cues, dual suspension, what's all this going to cost? At the time I'm preparing this video, the price is set to be $498 at release. However, note that this bike is made in China, not Taiwan like the Ozark Trail Ridge, and due to just say situations, this price could increase. But I suspect the at least launch price will be $498, which in my opinion is a steal. Well equipped and built to ride. You know what? Let's do that. Now, I do want to say that my initial points of having this bike out, I had to hide the branding. And a couple of people had a go at it with the hid branding, just knowing that it was a bike that's coming, not knowing what it actually is. But the footage you're seeing here is the day before I released this video, so I can unveil it and ride it out at the trail knowing that the footage is coming the next day. And the few people I run into, well, those are likely to be the people that are used to seeing me out with pre-release bikes anyway, so they know to keep quiet about it. So the ride, how does it ride? Well, first and foremost, first impression, first thing that stands out, obviously the comfort. Rolling over trails that I regularly ride on hardtail bikes, I can instantly tell the difference. A lot less bouncing, relaying up the spine, always good, but it also means more control because rear suspension's working to keep the tire planted on the ground. And after that first quick hop, the EXAFORM rear suspension, it's better than the usual big box bike rear suspension. It also doesn't bottom out with me in my 175 pounds. The extra 20 millimeters on the front suspension, 100 to 120, that's nice and noticeable. I'm over exaggerating the compression here, just to show you and have something on camera, but this is also noticeable. I mean, it's considerably smoother. I've upgraded a Suntour fork before from 100 to 120 and one from 120 to 140. It's always noticeable. And to my surprise, the rear shock's rebound adjustment actually does something. I didn't even notice it that much while riding, but I noticed it when I was looking over this footage. Look at the rebound speed here, and then I'll go to another slow-mo clip where I adjusted. One is all the way to the left, this one all the way to the right, or vice versa. But look at that rebound speed, the same slow-mo frame rate, but you can see the rebound is clearly slowed here, so that actually works. Now let's talk cues, one of my major impressions with this first ride. Cues, this stuff is no joke. Shimano did a majorly good job replacing their entry-level offerings, multiple of them, with cues. Everyone that's ridden this bike has commented about how well the cues shifts out and how crisp the shifts are. And chain slap is definitely at a minimum versus other competing budget group sets. The bike shifts well and definitely smooths out some of the bumps. What you're seeing here is hidden roots that jiggle my camera mount, at least on the ridge, but not a jiggle at all on the Slalom. Usually my first few rides on a new bike are always solo. I don't want to limit others while I'm cautiously getting the feel of the bike, letting it earn my trust. The Slalom's different. After the entry loop, I had the confidence to ride with some riders I met at the halfway point, even went to the jump line and took some, well, still tentative jumps, but my confidence was already ahead of where I thought it would be, so much so that I decided to follow these riders to Cliffhanger. Cliffhanger at Wildwood is a rooty ride on the edge of a drop-off to a creek, and I have never before attempted this on a brand new bike from Walmart. Something about self-preservation, just not trusting a brand new big box bike where there's, well, a steep drop-off to the right and the trail's angled and I'm riding over roots at the same time. But I could tell after just a short bit of riding that this Slalom definitely capable of riding trails like this. And here I am on a sub $500 bike, pretty confident in its ability to handle anything on this trail. Especially versus the hardtail that I usually ride here, this is noticeably less stressing on my body. Now the Kenda tires, while they do well on the rest of the trail, here is probably pushing them just about to their edge. But even they are working okay. The rest of the bike working great. That EXAFORM rear shock definitely helping me keep things in control.
Lost traction. Well, look at my little knobbies. Yeah.
I typically lean towards hardtails, but that's because bang per buck wise, they've always been the best path for me. Meaning the cheaper path, there's no rear suspension stuff to buy, but I might have to change my opinion given what this bike can do in factory form. Being able to ride a bike as is for longer, well, that kind of changes the equation somewhat. And then of course having the advantage of a boost frame. I think this bike is going to bring a lot of people to budget bikes that normally wouldn't be here. A full suspension that's worthy of attention. Now that's the good side to full suspension, and I'm not talking slalom versus anything else, I'm just talking full suspension versus hardtail here. The downside would be the climbing, the bane of my existence on a regular bike. A non-e-bike, I just always detest the climb, and a full suspension does rob a little bit of power. It's just inherent in the design. Anytime there's some squish at the back, there's a little less power relayed from your pedal stroke, but also on this bike, that super slack head tube, the 64 degrees, my measurement, well, that robs power too on a climb. It's just a little harder to do. It's also a little less nimble than the standard cross-country or standard big box bike experience, which usually have a steeper head tube angle. And I'm not used to that geometry. Like I said, I'm kind of a cross-country rider, so to my surprise, the two riders in front of me, when we pulled this bike side to side with those two bikes, one of which is, I think it's almost $10,000 is the value of that bike, the head tube angles were practically the same. The geometry overall, practically the same, which would explain why they seemed to enjoy it when I gave them a ride on the bike. I strapped a camera to one of them for footage, not knowing he would do his own voiceover. This is his honest opinions.
Ozark Slalom. Pretty sweet for a Walmart bike, not gonna lie.
That guy rides a bike worth more than my car, and he has a positive opinion of the Slalom. Enough said. If you made it this far in the video for the past 17 minutes, I've been regaling you with how awesome I think this bike is. And it is awesome. I mean, there's stuff here that we haven't seen before. I never thought Boost would come this fast to big box bikes. I wasn't even sure we would get it until the rest of the industry had moved on to something else, but here we are. That said, among the many positives, and most positive, there are a couple of negatives. No, nothing here with this fork. That's awesome. 120 millimeters at this price. I like it. The brakes, though, they work kind of like generic brakes. They're always hit or miss, and it took me a while to get these bedded in, and finally I got them to the point that I can lock up the rear wheels. But when a rider that weighs 50 more pounds than me tried, he can't lock up the wheels. He can slow, but he can't lock them up. Brakes are important. I got a black eye recently riding a bike with brakes that weren't working, and I thought I could compensate. I couldn't, so I like working brakes. Now I can lock these up after I bed them in, and this is really set to be upgraded, so I guess that factors in. Number two is the noise. You may have heard it when I was on the trail. That wasn't the Cues derailleur slapping around, it wasn't the suspension, it was the internal cable routing. No inner guides, and I don't know how to keep that from happening. And then there's the boost problem. Now, boost isn't a problem, that's a plus, a big marketing thing for this bike. But the way they designed this is a little unique. You can see where the chainstays sweep out and get very much wider, and by the way, that chainstay protector is super fun to press on. It's like bubble wrap that never pops, but looking at that, you can see that one edge there that's rubbed. That's because my heel rubs it. Now, I started out happening every time, but I don't know if I compensated or what. But my heel was rubbing. You can see how wide that swings out. That's a 68 millimeter bottom bracket, and it just has to go out so wide from there. I think maybe a 73 would have solved the problem. The only reason I'm not more critical about this, and there you can see the rub area where I've rubbed off some of that white paint, is these pedals. They are so small, the little plastic pedals, and those will be replaced by practically every rider, and practically any other pedal is going to be wider than these and move the foot out. I think the problem solves itself, and it's just the natural progression of having a bike like this that's going to inevitably be upgraded. But I share everything with you, so I want to point this out. Be honest, it's really the only out-of-the-box negative. And I wonder, based on the size of that bottom bracket, if going boost was a late add-on. And I'm sure someone's going to comment about the quick release up front. Well, let me say, this is no big deal at all. The people that are going to buy this bike, that are going to leave it intact, except maybe aside from the pedals, are going to be fine with this. The people that are going to upgrade it, upgrade the fork, they're probably going to upgrade the wheel anyway and go to a boost up front, so that's fine. Highlights, clearly, obviously, the boost and the Cues at the back. This Cues 9-speed, I couldn't find a model number on the derailleur, but I found one on the shifter. This is the U4000. Look, this is a lot of bike for not a lot of money considering. I mean, this is really a steal at the $498 price. We'll see how long that holds, but there is a lot here. A rear shock that's working well for me. A good pivot system built into this bike. I can't wait to take this apart. So many more videos. Make sure you're subscribed because I'm going all through this thing and I'm going to go all out with the upgrades and the boost. I don't know if you can hear the smile. I'm actually smiling. Boost on a bike that's going to be sold on the racks at Walmart. Would you have guessed that this was going to happen? I'm so happy, and this is such a good bike. A couple little small shortcomings, tweaks that I think can be overcome, but overall, a really good bike. Even the Kenda Kenda's tacky enough, tackier than the Recon Race Maxxis that I was recently running that had the same tread. I'm going to wrap this up. This is my first look at the FS.2 Slalom from Ozark Trail, a full suspension mountain bike with boost. At the time I'm making this video, the pricing is supposed to be $498. Comment below with your thoughts. I can't wait to hear what you have to say. And if you have any questions, get them into me because, as I said, a series of videos coming on this bike. So be sure you're subscribed. Thank you so much for watching and have a nice day.